Hello, BookTube. I have a tag for you this morning. I was tagged by the tag's original creator. It's the Burden of Proof tag, which was created by Britta over at her channel. I'll leave a link to her video down below. You should obviously subscribe to Britta if you don't already. She made the tag in honor of Jacqueline from 6 Minutes From Me, who just recently passed the Texas bar here in the United States. And I know I used to live in Austin, and I have firsthand knowledge of the kind of feat that is. That is no small thing. Hats off to her for such an accomplishment. And in the spirit of BookTube, where we really are the nicest people in the world, present company accepted, of course, Britta made a tag all about this in honor of that accomplishment. So this is the Burden of Proof tag, and it's rather nerdily devised along legalistic lines. So I tried to devise my answers accordingly. So number one is billable hours, which those of you who are not familiar with the law, that is lawyer speak for any time anyone in the world is ever drawing breath. And it's a book in which money plays an important role. And I want to start off with money plays an important role, but also there's a famous trial right in the center of the book, and it's For the Thrill of It by Simon Batts, which is about the Leopold and Loeb murders. These two young men, one of whom was from a fabulously wealthy family, who lured a boy into their car and killed him just for the thrill of it, just to see what it would feel like. Total sociopaths. And they admitted it. they admitted it. So really the trial of the century, as it was called, was not really a trial at all. It was a sentencing hearing. And it was long anyway, and it was histrionic anyway, and it made the papers like crazy. Because the two defendants were, they were young, attractive, well-spoken, well-dressed young men. And the crime seems so inexplicable. Just so inexplicable. We are accustomed now, 100 years later, to people who are, for want of a better word, they're ordinary. We could be with them in line at Walmart or whatever and not even notice them. And the next day, they pop a stitch and kill 20 people at a synagogue. Where once upon a time, it was assumed, maybe in a more naive age, that the person who was going to do that second thing could never passably do that first thing. And Leopold and Loeb, therefore, sent a shiver up the spine of the American collective consciousness. And the reason why money enters into the picture is because the parents, who of course wanted to save their sons from the death penalty, hired Clarence Darrow, the most famous lawyer in the world, one of the most famous lawyers since Cicero, and an absolute firebrand opponent of the death penalty, to represent their boys in court. And the rumor was, I mean, you just don't know. When you read Batts' book, you'll see a lot of this. He captures the whole era of the trial really well. But it was such a sensation that there were all sorts of yellow journalism news media accounts saying right away that Darrow had been paid $1 million, which at the time would have been an astronomical amount of money to pay a lawyer. In fact, he wasn't even paid a tenth of that, but it made good copy, and Darrow knew that. And he was a passionate and principled advocate in the courtroom, but he also knew what made good copy. And his peroration about Leopold and Loeb, about the death penalty, about just all sorts of mitigating factors, is a masterpiece of rhetoric. Considering how few notes he had for it, and considering how long it lasted, it really doesn't have a counterpart in American jurisprudence today. So, and the thrill of it all is a really good account of it all. There have been many accounts of Leopold and Loeb. There's one coming next year. They'll have a lot of work to do to beat this book, so I do recommend it. Then the next one, number 2, is Pacta sunt servanda, which is fancy pants lawyer Latin for you're supposed to keep your agreements. You're supposed to. Everyone is supposed to adhere to an agreement, to a pact. And the prompt is a modern classic with a legal twist that you think everybody should read. And I have 2 here that I want to do. And I'm using modern here in the Steve sense of the word, which is anything after the Italian Renaissance. The first one I want to mention would have needed no introduction if BookTube had existed 50 years ago, because it was a runaway bestseller, an enormous bestseller that everybody knew, so that customers would come into bookstores and say, I want that book about body parts. and the book clerks would have to know that they were in fact talking about Anatomy of a Murder. There were encounters like that in every bookstore in the country every day. I'm looking for that book about anatomy. You mean Anatomy of a Murder? It was by Robert Traver, and it was a novelization of a loose novelization of a real life event. But it was a huge hit, and it is gone now. It is completely forgotten, and I wonder how it would be revived. It has the idiom of the day. It has the offhand racism and sexism of the day. Although Traver was aware of it and has characters turn an eye on it, I myself think that it would survive the incessant, obnoxious purity tests of the 21st century. I think that it would find a readership if it were reissued, especially since that readership might be more adventurous than people think. I mean, Harper is coming out with a beautiful new paperback set of reprints of some work by Edna Ferber. If I thought anybody would be dated by now, it would be her. And yet the books are beautiful, and I bet they find a readership. I think we're the high sparrows of complaint culture are a little too chary about how flexible readers really are. There aren't many readers left in the world, but I think they're really flexible. They're willing to overlook a lot, and the people. The professional alarmists that you see on Twitter who say, well, I haven't read this book yet. It's coming out next month, but I've heard a rumor that there's one thing in it that doesn't meet with my approval, so it should be condemned, burned, pulped, and maybe while we're at it, we should condemn, burn, and pulp the author and her small children. And I firmly believe that those people are in the drastic minority, and I bet beyond a shadow of a doubt that they don't read. It's not the reading that has anything to do with why they're upset. They're not even upset. It's control, it's power, it's bullying. I think real readers are a lot more flexible than that. So I would support, is what I'm saying, a reprint of Anatomy of Murder, if just to find out. And then the other book that I want to mention, that I think everybody should read, I don't have any such doubts about, because the horrible, wince-inducing racism in this work is very much there to make you wince. It's 12 Angry Men by Reginald Rose that was adapted into a movie that is incredibly good. It's just incredibly good. If you haven't seen the old black and white movie of 12 Angry Men, you should see it. You should rectify that right away, because it's amazing. It's an amazing experience. And the original story is every bit as gripping as the movie. It's just it's talk about something everybody should read, and everybody can, because Penguin Classics did a normal black spine, very thin paperback reprint of 12 Angry Men, a very nicely designed thing with the original movie poster. So you have no excuse. You can drop your $7 and buy it if you want to. Then the number 3 is Construction Law, something of an oxymoron here in America, but maybe it's different in Europe. A book that dazzled you with its complex structure. And again, we're going to go with a legal book, and it's The Naked Singularity by Sergio de la Pava, which is about the New York criminal justice system, the New York Public Defender's Office, and it is a strange book. It is a brilliant work. It has a bit of a long history with me. The author originally self-published it in a really crappy edition, an edition that screamed self-publishing. It was a time when I still had a post office box over in Kenmore Square. I used to go there every once in a while and clear it out. And all sorts of stuff would come there. The minute the world realizes you have a post office box, you get everything in the world sent there, not just the stuff you request. And this was self-published, and literally it was a hardcover, and the hardcover and the backing were coming off of the pages. There was an island of pages in the middle. So my first impression of the thing was about as negative as you can get. I looked at it and thought, these self-published authors, how do they want to be taken seriously if this is the care they put into the product that is greeting an editor or a reviewer first thing when they open the package? And I was steamed, and then I made my way back to Hyde Cottage, and when I got here, I thought, well, you should read the book anyway. They took the trouble to send it to you, and the outer trappings, granted, it does scream unprofessional, but that's not the book. And so I started to read the book and was blown away. I read it. It's a huge book. I read it in one sitting and loved it. I went, at the time, there was Open Letters Monthly. I had a venue of my own, thank God. I wasn't reliant on the bad old days when you had to go to a string of editors and convince them. How would I have been able to do that? To convince an editor to allot space that they jealously guard for a self-published debut novel. No editor would have done that. Instead, I wrote a review of my own. and sang the thing praised it to the skies, and word caught on. Other people did that as well, and in due time, A Naked Singularity was bought. Sergio de la Pava's work was bought by a major publisher, and now he is a working published author. He has deals. He doesn't have to self-publish, and that's a real success story. Although I think about the incredibly tenuous chain of events that got that book to me, and I think just what I said in my original review, that we, the reading world, have just got to be missing great books. We've just got to. I mean, just the law of averages says that we are. If A Naked Singularity can come to broader attention literally by the skin of its teeth, then we are missing classics. We are missing books, and we don't know it. But anyway, I want to recommend that for construction law, because if you haven't read A Naked Singularity, you really ought to. Your library will have it now. How's that for a dream come true? When it was originally self-published, your library would not have had a copy, but now it will. So I recommend it if you like. It's legal fiction filtered through a lens of a weird combination of Boccaccio and Thomas Pynchon. It's not like anything that you will ever have read. Let's see here. Prompt number 4 is the Franklin Rules of Evidence. And this is a book with an unreliable narrator. And for a book with an unreliable narrator that has a legal theme, I'm going to pick someone I've already mentioned in this video, Cicero. Specifically, the Penguin Classic volume of his murder trials, the speeches that he made at various murder trials where he was the star in the open-air courtroom in front of a crowd of foot-stamping Romans. And the reason why it's an unreliable narrator is because these were not done on Instagram. Cicero wrote out his summaries, his case speeches after the fact to make himself look good. So you have to take the murder trials with a huge grain of salt. That's why the Penguin volume, or I've always wanted a really big, maybe there is one and I just don't know about it, a really big, heavily annotated translation of the murder trials in English, to give the reader even more knowledge about the background and cases that are being invoked in these speeches. I'd love a volume like that. I think it would do well. But nevertheless, the thing that we tend to forget, because you read Cicero's letters, you read his big, boring cod philosophy books, you forget that he was an advocate. That's how he made his name in the Roman world. He was a new man, so he didn't come from family or money or anything. And the murder trials gives you a hint of what it must have been like. It's a very distant hint, and it's filtered through its egomaniac author, but still, well worth your time. Then prompt number 5, a troublesome one in 2019, Roe v. Wade, which I don't mean doom and gloom on a Monday morning, but the current administration, the current Republican-controlled Senate in America, and the current Supreme Court, the majority of the current Supreme Court, want it done. They want it destroyed. They want it gone. They want it to be illegal to have an abortion in this country. I know we have lots of other things to worry about. In America, we have a president who got in front of one of his Nazi rallies and told people that Democrats on the Hill are in favor of infanticide. I mean, every single time you look at this sweaty, gibberish-spouting lunatic and think he can't sink any lower, he does. He told a cheering, roaring crowd of gun-toting rednecks that the Democratic representatives, including people they live with, want to kill babies. And thought nothing of it. And this isn't David Duke saying this sort of thing. This isn't Alex Jones pounding a table on some, third-rate cable broadcast. This is the President of the United States. So we have bigger things to worry about than Roe v. Wade, but nevertheless, that's the prompt here. And it's a book with a strong female character. And my answer here is a little bit of a cheat, because it's not actually a book. There are many, many books I could choose from. But all I could think about was Beth Bornstein, a character named Beth Bornstein. Most of you will not know that name. Most of you will not even know the show in which she appeared. There was a serialized TV show called Murder One. And it's all about a celebrity has been charged with a gruesome murder. And so there's all the hoopla involved in that. And the show follows that trial through a whole season. There in the beginning, the first half of Murder One. There are also subplots in the episodes. Then the second half of the show is just that trial. It was a trailblazer for all the one season, one stories shows that came after it. And it's really, really good. A first-rate cast of great actors just hitting it out of the park in every aspect of the show. And one of the aspects that I really love is the judge of the case. Once the case finally comes to trial, the judge is a woman named Beth Bornstein, and she is fantastic, just perfectly done. And at one point, she has a great moment. I'm selling this thing when you're never going to be able to find it, but she has a great moment where two jurors have been caught having an affair. And of course, that compromises the jury pool and needs to be addressed right away by counsel and the judge. So they haul the man and the woman into the judge's chambers. And she's extremely stern with them, saying that you have set back our work enormously. What were you thinking? This is all high publicity. There are journalists following you everywhere. And the woman cops an attitude. She says to her lover, well, what do we expect from the tired old establishment types? And Beth Bornstein has a great speech. It's probably on YouTube somewhere, where she says, young lady, some of us blazed a trail long before you got here, which has allowed you the freedom to sit in the chamber of a judge who is a woman and insult her. And so it's a wonderful moment, and that's the thing that came to mind. I didn't go rooting around for a book on the subject, mainly because I'm looking for an illicit reason to plug Murder One. I don't know how much of it is on YouTube. Probably it's all on YouTube. But anyway, that moment is incredible. And, the prosecutor in that case is also a woman and has some wonderful, wonderful scenes, including a moment that will break your heart where the trial has to be interrupted because her husband has suddenly died. And she and the defense lawyer are old friends, they're old adversaries, and they have a wonderful moment, in her office where she is talking about it and breaks down. For one moment, this woman who's been nothing but strength breaks down, and it will hit you. It will get you. But anyway, enough of TV. Let's get back to books. Prompt number 6 is Grand Jury. A book with a grand set of characters, and I'm going to choose an oldie but a goodie here, Kennedy for the Defense by George V. Higgins, which stars not those Kennedys, as his main character is always telling people, it's not those Kennedys, it's Jerry Kennedy. And he is a much harried public defender, and the book is full of great characters. Those of you who are familiar with George Higgins' stories will know he's really good at filling his book with colorful characters, and Kennedy for the Defense is a great example of that. And it's the first in a series. If you're so inclined, I don't know to what extent Kennedy is in print anymore, but if you're so inclined for a series like that in the hands of an old Boston master, you couldn't do better than Kennedy for the Defense. But we're going to talk about a couple of other old Boston masters as well, don't you worry. So number 7 is Malpractice, a book you loved that features an unlikable character, preferably a professional. And for this, the professional is Frank Galvin, who is the seedy, down on his luck, needs a big comeback lawyer in Barry Reed's novel, The Verdict. And I know in the course of The Verdict that you're supposed to, I think Barry Reed is thinking you're supposed to like Frank Galvin, at least a little. Root for him, side with him, just a little. Certainly in the movie version, the Paul Newman realization of the character you do side with. But in the book, I just reread it a couple of years ago, and I swear, I think that Frank Galvin is a big blind spot on Barry Reed's part. Barry Reed was a heck of a guy. He was incredibly nice. Gives literally a shirt off his back for you. Do anything, give you any kind of expertise. He was a huge book lover. Spent many a lunch hour away from a practice that was super busy, just hanging out in bookstores with a certain crew of people in a certain back room in a certain used bookstore, and just telling stories about books and loving to take a break from it all. And I really do think that Frank Galvin was a blind spot for him. I think that he thought that he had created a more likable character than he had. It's always weird when an author does that. But anyway, I'm going to pick The Verdict. I don't know if The Verdict is still in print. It would be worth your time. If you like legal fiction, it'd be worth your time to read if you can find it. And then we have some bonus questions. And the first bonus question, I don't know where it comes from. Maybe Jacqueline is in South Africa or from South Africa. The first bonus question is a South African author that you love. And I have one in mind that I've only read one book. I do love that one book. The author is Alan Cowell, and the book is Permanent Removal, a historical novel about the Craddock Four, about four apartheid protesters who were killed, lured into their deaths by the apartheid operatives of the apartheid government. An infamous case that sparked a lot of protests and a lot of literature and some people's readings, the downfall of the apartheid government, and also this book, which is beautifully, beautifully written, just amazingly written, a fantastic historical fiction account of a real life thing. I don't know, I have no idea if a Permanent Removal is available even in America or has ever had an American publisher. A copy was sent to me by a friend in South Africa who said, this is right up your alley, you're going to love this. And she was right, I did. So I'm going to recommend that. And then the last bonus question, number 9, is a book with animals in an unusual setting. Again, if we go with a very vaguely trial theory, a very vaguely legalistic theory, then it's going to be a book that I have mentioned and praised on this channel many, many times. I wish all of you would read it. It's one of those books where I wish everybody would read it. It's by T.H. White, and it's called The Book of Merlin. T.H. White, of course, the author of The Once and Future King, a long novel about King Arthur and the Knights of the Round Table and Lancelot and Guinevere and Merlin, the magician. And the Book of Merlin is kind of the unofficial 5th chapter of that book, in which a very old King Arthur, on the eve of a battle that will rip his kingdom apart, is transported to a badger den by Merlin. And Merlin is there, and the old king is there. He's incredibly old, right on the end of his life. And there is also a group of people, and they are animals. There is a dog, the king's dog. There's a snake. There is an owl. There is a badger. There is a goat. There is a little hedgehog. Immortally, unforgettably, there is a little hedgehog. And they have come together. It's a discussion, but it is also a trial. They are holding trial on the worth of mankind, on whether or not humans are worth saving. The conceit in T.H. White's version of Arthur is that he is a world figure, not just an English figure, and that the battle coming in the morning is a battle over humanity. And the jurors, if you will, assembled in that den are wondering whether mankind is worth saving. And there are cases for the prosecution, and there are cases for the defense, and it is an utterly enchanting 120 pages. Utterly enchanting. And the way it ends, it has one of the most satisfying endings. Well, unsatisfying. The very ending is unsatisfying. The very last page is bitter. But the ending of the main story, the ending of the discussion with that group, will stick with you forever. It will stick with you forever. It is the conclusion, the moment alone, looking out over England in the dark as the sun comes up, between the king and the hedgehog. The moment when the hedgehog shames everyone else in that den will stick with you forever. It is a perfect illustration of the weird, note-perfect magic that T.H. White could summon from time to time. Notes like that sound throughout The Once and Future King. And the Book of Merlin is almost entirely composed of them. Just anyway, and that is quasi-legal, so I can get away with it. So that is the burden of proof tag, which Britta made to congratulate Jacqueline at 6 Minutes for Me, and I second the congratulations. Good for you. That was a lot of fun. I love legal thriller type stuff. I just love it. So it was great fun to make a whole tag about it. And that's it for now, but I'm going to be back. I have plenty more bookish stuff to talk about with you, so I will see you soon. Thank you, BookTube.